Hi, my name is Yelena Ristic, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Prolotherapy in Perspective. If this is the first video that you are seeing, I would encourage you to watch the first one and some of the others as well to learn a little bit more about me in more detail. But I will give you the very short and sweet version, which is I am a college professor of English, both ESL and English, all kinds of writing. I was also a semi-professional flamenco dancer. I dance flamenco on a regular basis, which is a very impactful dance that's hard on your body. My background is I have a BA in anthropology and Spanish literature, so I'm university educated. I'm nerdy, I'm curious, I like to do research, I'm talkative, and I love to share. So that's part of the reason I'm doing, a huge part of the reason that I'm doing this channel is because hindsight is 2020. And me having the personality I have with the experience of injury, chronic pain, the traditional medical system, a lot of wrong turns, some very wrong prolotherapy to finally miraculous prolotherapy, I thought that I would be the person that I wanted to have in my corner when I didn't have that person. So again, hindsight is 2020. And who was I when I needed prolotherapy the most? Again, it's a bit of a long story, so I'm not going to repeat it now. The topic of this video is how to choose an excellent prolotherapy doctor. But what I will say is that through mismanagement and improper prolotherapy, so misdiagnosis, mismanagement, and improper prolotherapy applied to a somewhat complex and definitely long-standing injury or combination of injuries and compensatory muscular patterns, I was accidentally pushed into disability. And when I say disability, it's the kind of disability 50 out of 55 where I was on, just to give you an idea of how much painkiller, so not only the opiates and the gabapentin that I was on killed pain, but the other medications. So I was on a cocktail of 150 milligrams of tramadol, 900 milligrams of gabapentin, 300 milligrams of Seroquel, 1 milligram of lorazepam, 0.25 milligrams of risperidone. I think I forgot to mention that previously. And for good measure, I think, I could be wrong because I forget how it's dosed now, but I believe it was 20 or 25 milligrams of citalopram for when I was having severe anxiety attacks or panic attacks, because I had been left in the only thing that I could describe as inhumane, torturous pain by this series of incorrect treatments, including the bad type of prolotherapy, at least for me, that ended up getting me terribly disabled by 2012. So 2009, I got injured. By December 2011, let's say January 2012, I was going for prolotherapy. I chose the wrong doctor, wrong kind of therapy. I was completely ignorant. I trusted the wrong person. Through a series of events, ended up disabled through prolo and some manipulation through chiropractics by September of 2012. At that point, the kind of pain that I was in was so unbearable that if I had had a gun beside me, I would have just shot myself, let alone get out of bed. But I absolutely could not get out of bed without painkiller. I had to have help to be bathed, to be dressed, to be fed, I couldn't move. I simply could not move. When I moved, it was like someone was throwing a blowtorch throughout my, basically up to the middle back. So from the SI to my middle back, all the way down my leg. I had nerve involvement. My toes were flashing on and off, red. If I moved a certain way, I'd get more or less aggravation. I was terrified to move, and even if I did move, the pain was agonizing. It was a very short period of time in that state that I went from that state to, obviously, the second I was disabled or felt that disability and that strength of pain, I couldn't go back to work. So I started on a serious downhill in August, hoping I would get better with some more prolotherapy, which completely backfired. My contract for teaching at the college should have started in September. I was unable to do that because I was flat on my back in bed, unable to move. And I was hoping, I didn't know exactly yet what had happened and the severity of it, because you don't know how much what is supposed to hurt. And I hadn't been in a car accident, so I couldn't imagine that the extent of my injury was actually what it ended up being when we finally found that out, the full extent of it. And was just hopeful that I was in a horrible amount of pain that would dissipate, but then it didn't, and it did actually get worse and worse. So I ended up not being able to go back to work and therefore losing my job, not being able then to pay my mortgage, and then losing my house. And I had a husband who, at that time, who himself was unwell, could not deal with the entire situation, and by 2013 he was gone as well. So I was completely disabled, penniless, basically homeless. I had to move back in with my parents, and that was who I was then. And prolotherapy, in large part, helped me get there, because I was badly injured in 2009. I was in horrible chronic pain, but not like that. It was horrible pain if I didn't take painkiller, tolerable if I did, but I wasn't getting back to dance. I wasn't getting back to a comfortable quality of life, and I was trying to get back there. I was not in hideous disability trying to get out of it. I was in considerable injury trying to repair it. The wrong kind of prolotherapy threw me into this terrible disability, and it would take me years to find the right path and recover to where I am now. Where I am now is happier than I've ever been in my life. Remarried, still working on getting another house, and fully employed. Not only do I have my old job back, I have 2 other jobs because I love them, and that's a separate story that I might get into later. But for the purposes of this video, again, this is a difference between the right doctor and the wrong doctor. It could mean, I'm not saying it's always going to mean, but it very potentially could mean, depending on how wrong the doctor is and how particular your case is, severe, serious disability to miraculous healing. Because I am back to dancing flamenco again, which is a very high impact dance. And I didn't think I'd ever be able to walk again, let alone dance again. So that's the difference. To be honest, I've tried to record this video a few times today, and I find I have so much to say that I start to digress and get disorganized. And I figured out that the best way to organize this is in profiles. I will do a profile of the most ideal, amazing, fantastic, miraculous doctor, mine basically, although I'm not, and I will not say who he is, and the reason is because this is not for promotion. I don't want anyone to mistake it for promotion. My focus here is to share and to help, not to promote. And after this video today, you should be able to find your own miraculous or excellent or amazing doctor, okay? But my ideal doctor is who I'm going to describe first, and you should be ideally looking for someone where you can check off all these things. So how much experience or how many hours of actual injection experience with prolotherapy should your doctor have in his or her certification? I'm going to say check out the link below to the Regenix site and do your own research, but I'm going to say thousands of hours as per what is recommended by Regenix and what you have to pass through in order to be a Regenix certified doctor. My doctor was Regenix certified. Once you read the site, all the information on the site, you will know why I say that, okay? Full disclosure, my doctor moved away from Regenix because he's not just excellent, he's miraculous. And the reason I say that he's miraculous is, as phenomenal as Regenix is, as phenomenal as their methods are and their doctors are and their mission is, which you can read on the website, there are some limitations because they are also tracking all their work, logging and tracking all their work through studies, and they will ultimately limit the kinds of practice that their doctors can do according to their trajectory of study. Meaning, if you want to get experimental, so if your own desire, knowledge, and confidence supersedes that of what Regenix is currently doing, then you can no longer practice as under the umbrella of Regenix and do your own thing. So my doctor wanted to do his own thing, and he disassociated from that umbrella. He's no longer part of that umbrella, but he is Regenix certified, and he was a Regenix physician, prolotherapist, regenerative medicine doctor, many different ways of saying it, for quite a time. And then he went on his own way. And when I say he went on his own way, he does enormous amounts of professional development. I can count on him not being in the office fairly often because he's doing professional development. That isn't to say that he isn't treating most of the time. He absolutely is, but he definitely has a few conferences that I can expect that he goes to, usually around February, March, late January, or mostly February, that I know it's going to be really hard to get an appointment with him because he's very dedicated to his professional development. So you want a doctor who is very dedicated to professional development. So let's recap there. Thousands of hours in the certification process, okay? Very dedicated to professional development in regenerative medicine, prolotherapy, learning more and more about advances in prolotherapy, solutions, the use of solutions, techniques, excited about prolotherapy, passionate about it. And you also want someone who uses imaging to guide their injections, whether it's a C-arm, any kind of imaging, it doesn't matter what kind, as long and this is not palpation. So if your doctor can say says he sees the structure he's injecting with his hands by palpating, that is not what I mean. What I mean is someone who is using ultrasound or X-ray guidance. I think I can't remember. There's another, sorry, my brain isn't working. There's another type of imaging, but any kind of imaging where there's a screen, there's a needle, and there's you and your injury, and that doctor can see where their needle is going in your body in real time into the injury. That's ideal. So I'll talk about some, variations or possibilities that move away from that, but that's ideal. That's what you want. Again, even more ideally, you want a doctor who is certified in dynamic ultrasound. So that means they're moving limbs and structures around while they're ultrasounding so they can see in under muscles in different angles. They're looking for tears. So much like I would, I'll give you an example just to be really simple about it. So let's say your muscles are folded up like this and they're against each other. One is against the other, like my sleeve, parts of my sleeve are here. If this remains this way in a static ultrasound, maybe if you move me, all of me, my position on the table, you might get a little bit of a better view. But the best way to get a view is to be able to move the limb. So if I move my wrist, this opens up and you can see under and maybe find a hole in my shirt that you couldn't see because it was wrinkled up. And you wouldn't see unless I moved my arm, my wrist, or some part of my body to open up that material, or the way the material is pushed up against parts of the material pushed up against other parts. So dynamic ultrasound is vital, most especially if you are a complex case with long-standing injury. You might have some collateral damage that isn't easily visible. And this comes to another facet of what I would call an ideal or miraculous doctor, is someone who is a Sherlock Holmes of the musculoskeletal system and the whole regenerative medicine modality, in terms of wanting to, now you don't necessarily want a mad scientist, but you definitely want a Sherlock Holmes type of person who is going to be curious about how different combinations of solutions could work, how a different pattern of treating your injuries could work. Like maybe let's work on the knee first more, and then the hip, or maybe the hip and the lower back together, that will explore, for example, it will take into account how much money you have, what your activities as a person are, how your treatment itself is going to affect you post-treatment, who's willing to sit down and be a detective and a coach with you to help you through this, especially if you have long-standing complex injuries that you're having trouble or have been having trouble for years treating. I would say those things are a must. You need a Sherlock Holmes and an experienced Sherlock Holmes who uses some form of magnifying glass and guidance to see what he's doing. So that, in a nutshell, is your ideal doctor. I would add someone who's also empathetic and sympathetic, someone who is also not afraid to spend money for equipment and assistance. Other doctors I've gone to did not have, some did have assistants, very few, but most did not. And there might be the odd joint or two that you can inject without an assistant. But if it's a bigger treatment, you absolutely must have an assistant. And I have had one particular person, I'm not going to give any names for obvious reasons, go ahead and treat me for hours without an assistant and tell me that was perfectly fine. It would just drive my cost up. And it turned out that he wasn't a whole lot cheaper. He was an assistant worth cheaper than my current doctor. So red flags, no assistant. No use of guided injections, and a doctor who is not curious and passionate about discussing your condition and sharing with you why he's taking the approach that he's taking. And some people are cool with trusting their doctor. They do their research and they're like, I can't get into the nitty-gritty and all the details of the kinetic chain and muscular compensation. I don't get all that. I just trust you, and I hope that you can help me. I'm not one of those people. I like to know everything. I did loads of research, and then I would have questions, and I would also have ideas about my treatment, and sometimes my ideas made sense, and he was willing to entertain them. And sometimes he said, no, I think you're wrong because you're missing this piece of information, but at least we had a conversation. So that's my ideal doctor. That's the kind of doctor you want to look for. Now, Regenexx certified doesn't mean they still have to be under the Regenexx umbrella, but they will be much harder to find because if they're under the Regenexx umbrella currently and still working with Regenexx, they have a located doctor, which you'll see on the website link below. And I would say go there first. Try that first. Other certifications that are decent are, and I'm reading this because of the short forms, abbreviations, and also to remind myself, there's the AAOM, which is the American Academy or Association of Orthopedic Medicine. That's a good one. The AOAPRM, which is the American Osteopathic Association of Prolotherapy and Regenerative Medicine. And then finally, I'm going to say my least favorite, and I'm going to recommend, they're still linked below, I'm going to recommend that you read their website and try to figure out why I'm saying they're my least favorite. They're, to me, ethical questions, and also the question of who do they let in to be trained. Regenexx is quite picky and choosy about who they let in to be trained for very good reasons, which you will also find on their website. The Hackett Hemwell Patterson Foundation, on the other hand, is not as rigorous. And also the way they choose, let's say the venue in which they choose to train their doctors is very valuable in some ways, but also could be ethically questionable depending on your perspective. I studied anthropology, and a lot of it was ethics, and we did discuss medicine and human rights and, social issues. So I'm not saying I find it 100% problematic, but I do find it somewhat problematic. And that's why I'm part of the reason I'm not going to personally recommend Hackett Hemwall, Patterson trained doctors. Although I'm not saying that you can't run into an amazing one based on their experience and history, and also maybe for your particular, I'm assuming my viewing audience is going to be broad eventually. Right now, I know for a fact that I have people, because I've spoken to some of you, I've connected with some of you on social media, who have the long-standing injuries, a long history, complex injuries, have been in chronic pain for years, are unemployed because of it, are desperate, have been to some doctors, haven't gotten help, and are hard cases, difficult, very difficult cases, daunting cases even for some good doctors. And that's why I'm saying that's my ideal doctor. And for those of you who fit into what I just described, I'm going to highly recommend that you go to my ideal, a doctor that fits my ideal. And again, you will have some resources. And over time, I will find clinics that I can recommend. So bear with me, keep watching videos, and keep abreast. Subscribe. I'm going to suggest to you, most especially if you if you can already isolate, this is going to be a long journey for you. Subscribe. There's going to be a lot more that you're going to learn, a lot more I can share, a lot more I can discuss. If you are, on the other hand, someone who's watching and you've just gotten injured, you've heard about this prolotherapy stuff, you don't know what it's about, you happened along this video, how do I find the right doctor? It's going to be hard to always find the miracle, ideal, heroic type of doctor that I feel that I have, who I respect wildly as a person for so many reasons, as well as a doctor. I got lucky, and I wish I could share who he was, but I can't without undermining the mission of this channel. There are other doctors who can help you who are not the superhero doctor, let's say. And these doctors, I would say, at least should have several hundred hours of training. I would say in the thousands of hours of experience. So let's look at several. What does several hundred mean? That means a doctor who's just beginning. If we're looking at a regular work week, which is 40 hours, 4 times 4 is 160. Or sorry, 4 times 40. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 40 is 160. So that should be hundreds of hours means nothing in terms of how many patients you've treated and how long you've been doing this. Thousands of hours, 1,000 minimum or more, is not a tall order at all. Given, let's say on average, you get 100 hours if you were devoted to this, a month of practicing prolotherapy. 10 months is going to be 1,000 hours. In a year, you're going to get your 1,000 hours. So I would say thousands of hours. Also, that 70% of this doctor's practice is devoted to regenerative medicine and prolotherapy. In conjunction with that they also are knowledgeable in, and perhaps almost also offer, other types of pain or sports injury or musculoskeletal injury healing practices, such as physiotherapy, osteopathic medicine, osteopathy, maybe know a little bit about something about acupuncture, trigger point therapy, and some of those modalities as well. The reason is because you want to have more than one angle. It gives a broader and wholer picture. Also, I would stay away from doctors who are naturopaths, or I'm not saying naturopaths in general, but let's say you have just a GP, a general practitioner, or a naturopath who has taken some hours or some courses on how to give injections. They can also conservatively practice with, let's say, dextrose or a few other solutions that they decide to bring into their office, depending on what their certifications allow. That to me is problematic because they are not working with the kinetic chain and the musculoskeletal system the way an orthopedic doctor would, right? So if your doctor is a former orthopedic surgeon who's also doing prolotherapy, it's probably a very good doctor. If your doctor has done osteopathy and is also doing prolotherapy, pretty good doctor, understands referred pain patterns. So you want to look at someone who is very devoted to body mechanics, how a body works, anatomy, the whole musculoskeletal system, is very interested in physics and solving problems of physics and problems within the kinetic chain, going, you have no pain in your shoulder, but it's really out. I wonder why that is. Or, well, you say your neck is constantly going out. Looking for the origin below the neck, for example, because they're curious and they're trained. So that would be decent. A decent doctor is going to have a few thousand hours worth of practice, is going to be using ultrasound guidance, is going to be quite passionate about what they do, and is going to be devoting 70% of their practice time to what they do, and obviously is going to be doing a lot of professional development. Now, on the other extreme, doctors that I would personally avoid, I've had experience with this type of doctor. Someone who has done a certification but hasn't laid out enough money on excellent equipment. So I'll give you an example. And this doesn't have to necessarily be exactly what you're looking for, but it is an example. My doctor, being on the superhero scale of prolotherapists, has hooked up a huge screen to his ultrasound machine so he can magnify what he's seeing and see it more clearly, which helps him. It's not because he doesn't know where to put the needle. He does. He can do it off of a small screen, and he does that too. But on the big screen, he can see more, and he looks between the small and the big screen, and he also talks to me and can show me what's up there and does dynamic ultrasound with an assistant moving my limbs so that he can put all his attention on what he's seeing. Then there's the doctor who's got what he will try to convince you is a good enough centrifuge to turn your blood into decent prolotherapy solution and get a decent amount of platelets out there to help heal you. And I've gone to that kind of a doctor who, incidentally, and I'm really embarrassed to admit this, but again, it's because I was desperate, I was scared. He talked an excellent talk, and I had not done enough research on the Regenix site. I found out after the fact, by going to the Regenix site, how this doctor harmed me. He was a naturopath. He did do sports medicine, but he was not as passionate or experienced, and he definitely did not have advanced equipment. He did not at all use ultrasound guidance. He was not scared to take on a really problematic and huge case like mine. That should be a red flag. So if you're a case like mine, you're going to want all the bells and whistles along with your therapy. The best equipment, a variety of solutions that a doctor can use, a Sherlock Holmes who's into problem solving and talking to you like you're a real person who has the right to know what's going on in their body and is also intelligent. That was not, this other guy that I went to ended up hurting me, was very sympathetic, made a lot of logical sense, probably would have made an amazing doctor if he had spent enough time getting certified. And I believe that he himself was kind of misled because there is a school of thought that prolotherapy is not rocket science, which means, and when I say that, what I mean is pretty basic. You know, you make bioglue. I'm simplifying it now. You make bioglue, you put it in approximately where the pain is, or pretty much where the pain is, and the body kind of takes care of the rest. Well, no, it isn't that simple, okay? And I didn't know that because I didn't have access to the correct information, and I underwent treatment with someone who used a centrifuge that was not adequate to create the right kind of solution, and I got injected with a solution that was contaminated with my own red blood cells. It caused overinflammation, which made my already disabling and catastrophically painful injuries more painful and more disabling. And just to digress a tiny bit on a personal and human note, that's really devastating because you're already in insane amounts of pain. And let's just pretend money isn't an issue, but it's always an issue. Let's pretend money isn't an issue. Even if you're a millionaire or a billionaire, you're still in pain and in awful pain. And you're undergoing a fairly painful treatment to then be in an inflammatory cycle of 2 to 3 weeks more pain, crossing your fingers that all of that pain is going to dissipate and that your initial pain is going to get much, much better. But instead of that happening, it takes you 4 to 5 weeks, 6 weeks to get out of that pain cycle, which is termed a flare. There's kind of inflammation that is running rampant, uncontrollable inflammation. And I had an uncontrolled flare that was initiated by a doctor who was too far away from me that I could just call him and walk in and get it treated, and who didn't actually have the means to treat the flare. So an overinflammation can cause degradation of tissue, which can cause a weakening of tissue, which might not be a disaster if you don't have a huge injury, but in my case it was a disaster because I had so much injury that the inflammation is kind of like a fire spreading out of the pit and hitting areas that are holding the pit together. The pit falls apart and then it's free to go wherever it wants. So I ended up having my supporting structures weakened. My original injuries got bigger. I got other injuries and I was sobbing, bedridden, and extra suicidal in pain, and nobody deserves that. So that's why I'm going to recommend, again, I'm not an expert, I'm not an authority, I'm sharing my personal experience and what I have learned for what it's worth with you. Please do not go to someone that you don't feel very confident about. You're always going to feel a little bit nervous, but again, Regenix site, best place to research equipment used, types of solutions used. And I will also devote separate videos to the equipment, what it does, to the solutions, what they do. But it's just so much information, I don't want to digress too much. So now that you have the 3 profiles, the superhero doctor, the pretty safe, excellent, decent doctor, and the please don't ever go to this type of doctor, I hope that helps you a little bit more on red flags and please don't ever go to that type of doctor. I will share a little bit more of my bad experience with you. Again, I went to a pain doctor different from the one I just told you about, who also claimed that using dextrose over and over and over again, it's cheaper, but relatively will do the same job as a PRP treatment. You just need more dextrose treatments, but they're cheaper, so cost-wise it's kind of the same. So you're safe. You can, if getting to another doctor is too far away and it's adding cost. This was the logic that was used to convince me. And I'm not saying that this doctor did this knowingly. I don't know 100% whether he was purposefully giving me knowledge, giving me information that he knew was not true or not 100% true. He may well have 100% believed in what he was saying, but I'm going to say now he was wrong. Dextrose can irritate and can initiate proliferation, and it does. But here's the problem. If you are a hard healer and someone is administering dextrose, they're not also adding, they might be bringing some of the body's healing factors to the area, obviously, but ligaments and tendons are notorious for a smaller or almost non-existent blood supply, and the blood supply is what's bringing the healing factors. Dextrose has no healing factors in it. So the huge difference between dextrose and other types of prolotherapy solutions are that, for example, PRP and stem cells, or platelet lysate and stem cells, or bone marrow, bring healing factors and deposit a lot of them, more than your body could harvest and deposit into that area to help the area heal. Dextrose doesn't do that. So I will warn you that if you are a hard healer, if you have really strong injuries, it's not that dextrose can't help, and dextrose can't be used in combination. That dextrose alone could do nothing, or it could damage you worse. In my case, it damaged me worse because I was convinced that more dextrose shots were equal to fewer shots of PRP. And that was just not the case. I got carpet bombed. This person did not use ultrasound guidance. And as a result, one muscle that was quite damaged already got even more damaged, and it tore. And I lost even more function. So it was a horrible situation. On top of overinflammation, there were three times that I can definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, isolate that prolotherapy injured me worse. And in each one of those times, what I can give you as the profile of the doctor who treated me: no ultrasound guidance, not the best prolotherapy solutions, they skipped on that, and non-existent diagnostics. They just went off of their own. They went off of imaging provided by traditional doctors, which in a lot of cases is probably not enough. So do not go to those types of doctors. And that's it. If you have any questions, again, about what kind of doctor to go to, if there's something I missed or I didn't fill in, again, I'm doing this extemporaneously. Every time I try to follow a script and notes, I sound like a robot, or I get frustrated. So I will keep working on this and hopefully be a little bit more organized in the way I give my information. But hopefully you've gotten enough information in this video for my own experience to get a really good idea of what type of doctor you're looking for, what type of a personality you're looking for, what type of credentials you're looking for, what type of experience you're looking for, what type of equipment, as well as facility and variety of solutions this person can work with. Definitely, what's a decent doctor, if you can't find your superhero doctor in your area, and what is a doctor that you should absolutely avoid. Okay, with that said, the next video, so I don't make this one too long, is going to be about consults. What do you need for a consultation, and about cost. Consultation and cost. Cost is a really big issue. And I have no issue with how much prolotherapy costs, but when I say cost is an issue, it's not covered at all. And I realize that some of you watching this, and it truly makes me sad, and I wish I could help, but I'm just one person. It makes me terribly sad to know that you may now figure out what it is exactly that you need, but you are unable to afford it. So again, I'll talk more about what to do in that situation under cost the next video. And then there are those of you who have maybe already spent loads of money on the wrong treatments. And some of you who might be wondering, is it worth selling my house? And again, I'll talk more about that under cost. But just a general quick perspective on cost. If you have kids and you're wondering if you're going to take away from their education, if you have other obligations, a spouse that depends on you, and all these things, they are factors. But I will say to you that if I could know how much prolotherapy would help me, the right prolotherapy would have helped me. If my doctor now would have charged me everything that I had, down to my very, very last penny, but could promise me, and I mean like shirtless, homeless, the whole deal, but could promise me the physical condition that I'm in now, I would have made that exchange like this. Because with your body and your mind intact, fully functioning, fully engaged, you can rebuild much more, much faster than you can ever imagine. But if you're in a state where you're nickel and diming yourself and keeping yourself in a chronic pain purgatory and a psychological nightmarish life, you won't have the strength to do a really big turnaround. So if it means, so again, I'll talk about that in the next video, but keep that in mind. And if you have any questions for me about my own personal journey, please ask, and I'll video that too, or I'll answer you however seems appropriate. So again, I'll quit while I'm ahead. Thank you so very much for spending the time to watch this video. I hope I've been of some help. Please, please, I invite any criticisms, any challenges, any information that maybe I've missed, and all questions, of course. So take care. Thanks again for watching. All the best.